We are in Torah Yud-Tet in Likutey Moharan, Seif Hey, part 5. This Torah is called Tefilah LaChavakuk, and Rabbi Nachman is explaining to us in this Torah how to immunize ourselves from the 70 klipot. There are 70 forces of darkness which block, they steal away the light of HaShem from the side of holiness, and they are forces of disconnection. And these 70 forces of disconnection are the 70 forces of idol worship, 70 languages of the 70 nations of idol worshippers. And all of these 70 forces of evil, because Rabbi Nachman explains that each one of these 70 languages has a specific evil to it. It has a specific negativity, a specific negative character trait, a specific negative attitude, a specific sin, a specific way of being, which is disconnecting one from Hashem. And the accumulation and the collection and the combination of all of these 70 forces of evil, forces of darkness, is in the burning furnace of lust for immoral illicit sexual behavior, what's called Esh HaTav'era Shel Ta'avat Niyuf, Rabbi Nachman calls it. And their only power is what they're able to steal from the side of holiness, from what Rabbi Nachman calls in the Torah the Eitz HaChaim, the tree of life. And the only way that they can steal any energy from the tree of life, even though the tree of life is so beyond them, it's so transcendent, it's a different dimension. They have no access to it. To such a point that, as we know, that according to Kabbalah, they would be completely canceled out. They would be obliterated in the face of even the smallest revelation of light from the tree of life. That's how they cannot coexist. They cannot exist in the place of revelation of absolute truth. And the revelation of absolute truth is in the tree of life. And those forces of darkness, are forces of sheker. And therefore they can't exist in that place of absolute truth. And so how are they going to exist if their only existence is through the life energy they manage to steal away from the tree of life, from the side of holiness, if they can't even get close to this tree of life, the side of holiness? And that's why Rabbi Nachman explains to us this concept that the Zohar teaches us, the klipa of noga. The klipa of noga is a mixture of good and bad, and it's almost like an intermediary in between these 70 forces of evil, of idol worship, and on the other side, the tree of life. And this klipa of noga is represented by the concept of the tree of knowledge of good and bad, which is the Eitz Hadat Tovara. And what they try to do is they try to cause the bad in this noga to overcome the good in the noga, to swallow up the good in the noga. Because we said the noga is a mixture of good and bad. And when they persuade through this intermediary stage, through this klipa of noga, they are able to overpower the good within it. What does it mean to overpower the good? It means that they are able to conceal the good, swallow up the good, and call the small sparks of good, which is in this place called noga, call them their own. That's what they do. The klipa calls the good as if it's theirs. And they try to put themselves in place of the side of holiness. Okay, this is something that we see, a theme that we see a lot also in Christianity. Okay, where Yeshu, basically their way of thinking is that God is me, and God is here for me, and not the other way around. God is existing in service of me. And in the Torah, we have the opposite understanding. In the Torah, we were created to serve Hashem. And we were given the Shabbat that we may serve Hashem by honoring the Shabbat. And so we were created to fulfill the Torah and the mitzvot, to fulfill the commandments of Hashem, and to honor Hashem, to glorify Hashem's name. Yes, at the end of the day, the reason why Hashem wants us to serve Him and to glorify His name is for our own benefit, because by doing this, this is a process that Hashem has outlined for us, through which we may be included in Hashem's light. And that's the greatest pleasure and bliss and perfection that is ever imaginable. Yes, but we were created, we are in service of Hashem and not Hashem in service of us. Okay, and so that's a very important understanding, recognizing this difference. And so what they do is that the 70 klipas, the 70 forces of darkness, they try to swallow up the good in the tree of God, good and bad, and they try to conceal it as if the good belongs to them, as if whatever force there is in the universe belongs to them. And this is the basis of all idol worship. Okay, Christianity, according to the Rambam, according to the Torah, Christianity is definitely idol worship, even though Islam is not idol worship. They believe and they serve the one God who created everything, and they're not saying that a certain man is a god, like in Christianity. They are serving the one God. Yes, they may have false prophets, okay, but that's a different issue. So idol worship, the basis of all idol worship is when they take a certain force in the universe or a certain person and they make that into a god, be it Yashka, be it the sun or the moon or some other, or sometimes they make themselves. Okay, Paro, as the Medrash tells us, Paro made himself an idol. Nebuchadnezzar as well, he made himself into an idol. Okay, and so what they're doing is they're taking these sparks of holiness in that intermediary field called the Noga, that field that is a mixture of good and bad, and they're calling it their own. Those small sparks of energy that they find in the universe, be it in themselves or in someone else or in something else or in a statue, they're calling it God. So they're concealing its connection to Hashem. They're concealing the fact that it only exists because of Hashem, that energy, that force. They're concealing the fact that there is only one energy and one force in the whole universe. Einod milvad, there's nothing but Him, there's only Hashem. They're concealing that fact and they're denying that truth. Okay, as we said, their whole power is the concealment of the truth. They're denying that truth. And in this way, they're able to steal those sparks of holiness that came originally from the tree of life. So from the tree of life is now being brought to a descent of a blemish, an imperfection, because those sparks of holiness that were found in this place called Noga, they are really they belong to the tree of life. And here, those sparks of holiness have been swallowed and taken by the side of those of evil, the primordial serpent. Okay, and so Rabbi Nachman is teaching us that in this Torah, that our work in this world is to go through the process of rectifying our own personal reality, so that we, instead of allowing, instead of having the 70 forces of idol worship swallow up the sparks of holiness from Noga, and therefore steal life energy from the side of holiness, instead of having such a thing happen in our personal reality, we must learn to do the opposite. We must learn to dissolve and cancel out the negativity of Noga, with that mixture of Noga and the mixture of the tree of good and bad. We want to dissolve and cancel out the negativity over there. We want to subdue it and empower the sparks of holiness in that place, so that they may be reconnected to their source and they will complete and perfect and elevate and empower their source. What's their source? The tree of life. Another way of calling it is Shlemut Lashon HaKodesh, the holy language. And the perfection of the holy language, the empowering of the holy language is what happens when you cause the negativity in the mixture of Noga to fall away, and you return the good within it to the holy language. And Rabbi Nachman says that this is all synonymous with the purification and the rectification of a person's sexuality. And that's the tikkun abrit. And when a person has achieved and accomplished that, then a person has achieved and accomplished this perfection of the holy language. What is it connected? How is it connected to the perfection of a person's sexuality, to tikkun abrit? Because as we know, the accumulation and the combination and the collection of all the forces of the 70 nations, of the 70 idol worship is immoral, illicit sexual behavior. It's the impurities, the blemished sexuality, the disconnected sexuality. And so when you rectify that, in effect, what you're doing is you're cutting them off. You're cutting off the head of the serpent so that he is not able to steal from the tree of good and bad, the sparks of holiness, and then he ceases to exist. The falsehood, the sheker ceases to exist, and then those sparks of holiness in the tree of good and bad are returned to the tree of life, and the tree of life is empowered and elevated. Okay, and so that's a summary of what's going on in this Torah. And so at this point here, Rabbi Nachman explains to us that there's this concept of taking a hot shower on Friday afternoon before Shabbat. And when you take a hot shower, there's the Zohar tells us, this burning fire of holiness that descends upon the head of Noga. Noga tries to ascend. When the Malchut is ascending on Friday afternoon, the Malchut, the Shechina, the woman of valor, is ascending to receive light from the higher realm, from the tree of life, from the higher worlds. Okay, and the Noga wants to jump in on that train. He wants to jump in and catch the elevator together with the woman of valor so that he can steal away her light. Okay, so that he will steal away that life energy, and we don't let that happen. And one of the ways that we make sure that that doesn't happen, we protect the Shekhinah, is by taking a hot shower on Erev Shabbat. And by doing so, there is this holy fire that comes down on the head of Noga and doesn't allow it. It dissolves, it cancels out the fire of the 70 nations, the fire of immoral sexual behavior, illicit sexuality. And so that holy fire cancels out that other fire. And then it has no more power to be able to ascend on Friday afternoon with Shabbat. So that's what Rabbi Nachman is explaining to us here. This is the concept of the flame of fire that descends on Shabbat, on Friday afternoon before Shabbat, upon the heads of the evil forces, and preventing them from being included and encompassed in the Noga to draw sustenance from the side of holiness. Okay, Perush. Now he explains it. כי בערב שבת, בכניסת שבת, נכלה נוגה בקדושה. ואז רוצים גם שאר הקליפות הטמאות לגמרי לעלות אל הקדושה, ואז יורד שלהובה דאש על ראשם ונופלים למטה. So Friday afternoon, what happens is, the tree of good and bad is rectified Friday afternoon, and the tree of good and bad really represents the 6 days of the week. The 6 days of the week in the Zohar, they are represented by the two sides. There are the Mishnayot are made up of Shisha Sidarim. Okay, there are 6 Sidarim in the Mishnah. And in the Mishnah, the conversations in the Mishnah, the halachot of the Mishnah, are coming to clarify for us, to separate between what is tahor from what is tameh, the pure from the impure, the mutar from the asur, what is permitted and from what is not permitted, and the kasher from the pasul, what is kosher from what is not kosher. And these are the three birurim, three selections, clarifications between good and bad that happens during the 6 days of the week. Okay, and the reason why it's associated with the 6 days of the week and why it's associated with the tree of good and bad is because only in a place like Noga there is this work of needing to select the good from the bad, because there's a mixture of good and bad. So only in a place where there's a mixture of good and bad, there's a mixture of kasher and pasul, tahor and tameh, mutar and asur. Only when there's a mixture of this, then when the Mishnah comes and clarifies and brings us to a tikkun, to select the good from the bad and to make order, okay, from the chaos to make order. But when you're speaking about the Eitz HaChaim, the tree of life, it's completely good. It's a place of absolute good. In such a place, there is no need, there is no mixture of bad there, and so there's no need for that selection of good and bad. You're in a place of kulo Shabbat. It's completely Shabbat. Okay, and so the concept of that selection that we do is associated with the 6 days of the week. It's associated with the Eitz Hadat Tov Hara. And what happens is Friday afternoon before Shabbat, so there's a rectification that happens. The Noga has been rectified through the process of the 6 days of the week. The good has been selected from the bad. And so the bad, the evil, the negativity in the Noga has been subdued, and the good within the Noga has been empowered. And so now we are able to lift up the Noga and include it in the Kedusha because it has been rectified. The rectification of the Noga is the separation between the good and the bad. Okay, and as we said, that when the bad is identified, when the falsehood, the sheker is identified as what it is, then that itself is revealing good. So the fact that you recognize that this is good and this is bad, just by saying that this is the negative side, and this is the non-truth, and this is the temporary, okay, by recognizing that in itself allows the existence for that aspect, because now that aspect is become a vessel for a greater truth to be revealed. Okay, because the greater truth, as we spoke about in yesterday's class, is when the greater revelation of truth, the greatest revelation of truth is when it is revealed how false the falsehood is, when it is revealed how temporary the temporary is. And then we recognize in a much deeper, more profound way how permanent is the permanent, how true is the truth. Okay, and so when you select the good from the bad, and that's the tremendous importance, Rabbi Nachman many times in many places repeated, explained the significance and the importance of learning halacha every day. Okay, when you learn halacha every day, you are involved in this tikkun. When you learn Gemara as well. But that's the importance of learning the pshat of the Torah, the revealed part of the Torah, because all the revealed part of the Torah that goes into not just the revealed part of the Torah, but more specifically the halacha of the Torah. And halacha of the Torah includes also the process that got you to that halacha. Yes, there's a very special importance that Rabbi Nachman explains in learning the halacha psuka, which means the end halacha, okay, what has come out at the end after all the Gemaras, which is like the Shulchan Aruch, the Mishnah Berurah. But any time a person is learning halacha, and that includes Mishnayot and Gemara, because that's the process of getting to the halacha. It includes long pieces of the Bet Yosef in the Torah, okay, which is long and not, you're going through a whole process. It's not just a halacha psuka, but what you're doing is you're going through a process of clarifying the good from the bad, and that tikkun is tremendous. That's the tikkun of this world, basically. The tikkun of the 6 days of this world. The tikkun of the Eitz Hadat Tov Hara is through halacha. And then we also have in this world the ability to connect ourselves to prepare ourselves and to connect ourselves to the light of the Shabbat. And that's why in this world as well, we have Shabbat, even though the work in this world is to rectify the 6 days, but we also experience the Shabbat because it's all a process, okay? And so there is the limud of halacha every day, and then there's the limud of Kabbalah every day. And these two are the foundations of the tikkun that is done through Torah. The most important aspects that happen through the most important tikkunim that happen through our limud of Torah is through these two aspects of the limud of the Torah, the halacha and Kabbalah. And so what you're doing is, so the halacha is representing the 6 days of the week, and the Kabbalah represents the Shabbat. And the 6 days of the week, what that does is we're separating the good from the bad, and now the negative or the bad or the falsehood in Noga is also able to be elevated because it itself is being identified. It has been identified as what it is. And so it no longer has any power in a negative way, just the opposite. It is now causing a greater revelation of truth to happen. And so the Noga is lifted up, elevated, it ascends, and it is included in that rectified state. It's included Friday afternoon. It goes up with the worlds, the Aliyat HaOlamot, and it goes up and it's included in the side of holiness. But then there's the Klipot, the 70 forces of Klipa, of the 70 nations of idol worshippers, that wants to tag along. It wants to tag along with the Noga that is being elevated. And so we don't let that happen. And that's what happens when we take the shower, they take the bath in the hot water. There's this burning furnace, this holy fire that comes down and cancels out the negative fire, the burning furnace of the 70 nations. Okay, שזהו סוד כוונת רחיצת מים חמים בערב שבת, כמבואר בכוונות, וזהו בחינה הנ"ל שצריכים לברר הטוב שבתרגום, שהוא בחינת נוגה, שיהיה נכלל בלשון הקודש, ושאר לשונות העכו"ם, שהם בחינת רע גמור, צריכים להפילם ולבטלם לגמרי. היינו כנ"ל. And so that's what you're doing also, says Rabbi Nachman. When you're reading the pasuk, the parsha, twice you're reading the pasuk, the Lashon HaKodesh, and once the Targum. The intention is that we are lifting up, we are taking out, selecting and lifting up the sparks of holiness from the mixture of good and bad, which is the language of Targum, and those sparks of holiness we're bringing back to empower the holy language, to increase the light, the recognition of the light in the holy language, okay? And at the same time, the other 70 languages, the 70 languages which are completely bad, are canceled out, are nullified. Okay, and so that is the conclusion of Ot Hey, of part 5 in this Torah. The understanding of basically what we're doing here in the 6 days of the week with the tree of good and bad, and in our personal reality in this world. Okay, it's all about selecting the good sparks in the Noga, lifting them up to the Eitz HaChaim, to perfect the holy language. Okay, so you're selecting the good sparks in the Targum, lifting them up to empower and perfect Lashon HaKodesh, and as regarding the other 70 languages, those are completely canceled out, completely obliterated. And that's what Hashem does. Hashem, as we know, that at the time of the redemption, Hashem will slaughter and kill the primordial serpent. Okay, and this slaughtering and the killing of the primordial serpent, as the Baal Shem Tov explains it, is all about removing any holiness, any light, any energy of holiness from within the primordial serpent, because the primordial serpent, as we said, doesn't have an existence unto itself, only what it stole from the side of holiness. And the slaughtering of the primordial serpent, right, when Hashem is going to shecht the as we know, the Malach HaMavet and all that, right, the Yetzer Hara, right, Hashem is going to shecht the Yetzer Hara. That means that Hashem is going to separate and take out whatever good is in there, swallowed up in there, and then it no longer has any existence, because its existence is only what it's able to conceal, swallow up and conceal from the side of holiness. Okay, and so that's what we're doing every day in order to bring the Geula. Every day every one of us needs to live in alignment with this way of the Geula. Okay, we want to live in this way, and we do that through the Torah and the mitzvah. Every time a person learns a halacha, not only you learn halacha, like the Baal Shem Tov taught, when you learn Torah and you learn halacha, it's a huge mitzvah. So the Baal Shem Tov said, when you fulfill that halacha, when you follow that halacha, that light of the Torah, of that halacha, is included in the fulfillment of that halacha. So when you learn halachot, and when you learn mishnayot, and when you learn Gemara, and then in your day-to-day life, you're living according to that, you're applying your limud Torah in the way you're acting, what you're eating, and what you're making sure not to eat. Okay? When you wake up in the morning, where you look and where you don't look, what you think about, what you don't think about. All of these decisions that a person makes throughout the day and applies the halachot to his daily life, this is rectifying the tree of good and bad. And in this way, the person is doing what the Mekubalim call, in Kabbalah it's called birurim, selecting the sparks of holiness. And that's the process of bringing about the redemption, bringing about the Geula. And so in the next part of this Torah, we're going to see how this was all a foundation, this understanding was all a foundation for us to understand how through this process a person purifies himself and becomes a mirror, as we spoke about, a mirror that, like the tzaddik of the generation, that anyone who hears Torah, listens to Torah directly from the tzaddik, facing the tzaddik, gazing upon his holy face and hearing the Torah directly from him, the tzaddik is like a mirror, and that person will be inherently motivated and directed to teshuvah, to rectify whatever needs to be fixed, and to reconnect himself to Hashem and reconnect himself to Hashem's Torah and to the mitzvah. And so we'll see more about that in the next shir and the next part of this Torah, B'ezras Hashem.